As always, thank you for being here and God bless you. If you're returning, thank you for the support. If you're new, please hit the subscribe button to be updated to new additional content. So I'm just cruising around in the work car headed downstate. I got about hour and a half drive, so I figured now was a good time to go live and just discuss a couple of things with you guys. So today we're going to talk about troubleshooting coral. How many times have you bought a nice coral, spent a little bit of money on it, whether it was cheap or expensive, it doesn't really matter. It's coral that you like, and you put it in your tank, and I don't know, a week or so goes by, a handful of days, and everything looks great. Next thing you know, the coral's not doing so hot. It's lost color. Maybe it's puking stuff out of its mouth, ejecting stuff. Maybe it's shriveled in. It's not as big and lush and flowy as it usually is. Something's not right. Well, guys, to be successful in this hobby, it really comes down to four basic things. Number one is water quality. Number two is water chemistry. Number three is water flow. And number four is lighting. As long as you're able to maintain these four things, you're going to be successful. So let's break them down a little bit. Let's talk about water chemistry. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Not always. So when I say water chemistry, obviously we're talking about, the chemistry aspect of the water. We're talking about the additives, the things inside the water that are helping the coral grow, right? So you get your magnesium, your potassium, your calcium, your iodine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We also have to think about other things that are involved within that water chemistry. Are you doing water changes? If you're not doing water changes, then your corals are what? Well, they're draining the water of these essential nutrients, right? So we have to replace them. You can replace them either through dosing, that's how you replace the elements, or through water changes with a good high quality salt. So if you're not using a good high quality salt, I recommend spending a few extra bucks and picking up something that you've done your research on and that you've seen other people have success with. So let's talk about water quality. Water chemistry and water quality are two different things. Your water chemistry can be on point. You can have enough magnesium, calcium, et cetera, et cetera. Alkalinity could be fine. pH could be great. But if your water quality isn't good, that doesn't really matter, does it? So when we talk water quality, what I mean is, what's your water source? Are you using RODI water? Are you using RO water? Are you using well water? Are you using city water? I mean, this all has a play. Some places will allow you to buy natural seawater. There's a lot of silicate in that, so expect, diatom blooms and algae, but some people prefer to go that route. Personally, I use RO deionized water. Now, there's a difference between RO and RODI. RO is just ran through an RO membrane. The TDS is probably between 5 to 15, give or take what your TDS on your well is. Now, if you're pulling well water and your TDS is really high, 4, 5, 600 or higher, RO is not going to be the only thing that you need. You're going to need an RO with a deionized bed, because your TDS, even through an RO, if your TDS off your well is high, it's still going to be kind of high. So the absolute best choice for water quality is RO DI, reverse osmosis deionized water. Now you can buy filters that allow you to do this yourself, or you can go to maybe a local fish store that sells RO deionized water, and you can buy it for that. Usually it's pretty cheap. So water quality is probably, I would say, the most important next to lighting, because we can always change the water chemistry, right? We can always add more stuff. So once our water quality and our water chemistry is good, let's check our lighting. Maybe the lights that you have aren't strong enough for the coral that you've chose, or maybe they're too strong. Depending on what kind of light source you go with, some are adjustable and some are not. So if you have a adjustable light source, try dimming the lights, or maybe you need to increase the amount of light given. This all depends upon what kind of coral you're trying to grow. If you're growing soft coral, well, they don't really need as much light. If you're growing SPS, acropora, monopora, plating corals, yeah, they need a little bit more light. So use your judgment and kind of try to figure it out, move the coral around and see what happens. If you decide that it's not your lighting, I was going way too fast right there, and I actually thought I was going to get pulled over with that stake up. I was doing 85. I was doing 85. It is 70. Oh my gosh, we're lucky. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. That could have been bad. All right, so we'll just watch our speedometer here. Sorry. Okay, so lighting. Back to lighting. once you play around with your lights and you kind of adjust them a little bit, and you realize, well, maybe it's not the intensity of the light, or maybe my lights are okay, or blah blah blah. Try repositioning the coral. Move the coral around a little bit. Maybe if it's up too high in the tank, well, maybe the par coming from that light is just too much for it. So try to move it down. And then the opposite goes if you don't think it's receiving enough light. Move it a little bit and see what happens. When you put coral in the tank, you want to do an acclimation period. What I mean by that is, first thing you should be doing, you should be acclimating it to your water. You shouldn't just take a coral and dump it into the tank and call it good. Now, I've done this before and I haven't had any issues, but it's not what I recommend. So when you get your coral, get a bucket, you can tie a knot in a tubing and make a drip acclimator, or you can just take a cup of water and, I don't know, fill it up about, yay much, dump it into the bucket with the coral, and then let it set for 10 minutes or so, and then add a little bit more, add a little bit more. That's another effective way to acclimate. So let's assume you've done all that. Now the coral's in the tank. Well, now the coral needs to acclimate, to your lights. So you should always start a coral, even if it's a high light, high intensity coral, you should always start it in the bottom on the sand bed. Leave it there for a handful of days and then work up. Okay, and then you can place it a little higher up. So now for the final step, let's talk about water flow. Water flow is huge. Depending on what kind of coral you have, water flow is just as important as the other three. If you have a euphyllia or a soft coral, let's talk about hammer coral, torch coral, frog spawn. Those are pretty popular corals, right? I would say that they're still, I guess, beginner coral because there's not really anything too hard about growing them, but they're kind of more in that medium kind of, I wouldn't call it advanced, but let's just call it you experienced reefer area. They don't like real high intensity light, and they don't like being blown around all the time by either laminar straight flow or even just randomized strong current. They don't particularly care for it. So if you have a lot of euphyllia in your tank, or polyped coral, or just coral that doesn't particularly like strong water flow, of course they're going to be closed up. Of course they're not going to be, as big and full as they should be, and they might even, have some flesh being worn off of them depending on how the water flow is hitting them. Long story short, it can kill it. So you need to reposition or readjust your water flow. It's why I recommend buying a good, high quality power head that you can adjust yourself. I would personally recommend the Ecotex. Okay, the MP10 is what I have. It's got a quiet drive operating system. It's wireless. I can, connect to a Reef Link and control it with my computer. I can change the flow, and there's various types of waveforms and flows that you can make. I would recommend something like that. If you want to go the cheap route, I mean, that's okay too. Just know that your coral is going to be blasted in one direction by water flow, and it's not going to be very good for it. So you might have to buy 2 or 3 power heads to try to create some sort of a randomized flow in the tank, or you can buy a wave maker. But just know that wave maker is going to reduce the life of your pump, because your power head is not intended to be turned on and off randomly to create random wave flows. Unless you're buying a pump that's specifically designed for that, like an Ecotech, you're going to wear your pumps out. Then the other thing you have to think about is, if you want to go the cheap route and you don't want something that's customizable and controllable, then what you have to understand is, if you're putting 2 or 3 pumps in there to create a randomized flow, oops, I think my video paused because it was telling me I was low on battery. If you're not buying a good high quality pump that you can adjust water currents with, if you have to go out and you might have to buy 2 or 3 cheaper pumps to make a randomized flow, what you have to understand then is, well, you can't adjust the flow as in the gallons, per hour rate that's coming out of that. So it's going to be a very strong current more than likely. So now we're back to, well, now we have too much flow. If you can't get around that and there's really no adjusting to your pumps to be had, try angling them. You can angle them different ways: off the back glass, off the front glass, tilt them up to agitate the surface of the water. You can reposition power heads that can't be, get on the road, Gage. You can readjust power heads that can't be adjusted per se, but just by changing the direction of where the pump flows, you can change up, the way that the water moves. So that is another option that you do have, is to try to do that. There's another state cop. Oh my gosh, I can slow down. Now, if that's an option, the final stage I guess you could try to do is reposition that coral somewhere else in the tank and just kind of watch the flow and the movement of the coral. If it's getting blasted over here, try putting it in a corner or underneath or tucked around some rock work where it can still get decent lighting, but maybe the flow isn't so strong. Try all these things, and I'm willing to bet if you can pinpoint which one of these it is, water quality, water chemistry, water flow, or lighting, you're going to be successful and you're going to solve your issues. When in doubt, guys, do a water change. Water change, water change, water change. I don't care what you've heard or what you've read. It's one of the most important things about this hobby is water changes. All right, guys, until next time, God bless, and thanks again for watching. Take care. Bye.